A woman helped a leopard mom, but weeks later, she returned with a shocking surprise. At first, it seemed like a simple rescue, an injured predator freed from a cruel trap. But when the leopard came back, everything changed. She wasn't just looking for safety. She was leading this woman straight into a secret no one was supposed to find. What began as an act of compassion quickly turned into a fight for survival against powerful forces, buried lies, and dangers, lurking closer than anyone imagined. And the leopard's return wasn't a coincidence. It was a message. But what exactly did she bring back? And why does the truth hidden in her shadow put this woman's life on the line? Before we begin, tell me your city or country in the comments. It turns this space from a screen into a circle of real hearts. Thunder crashed overhead as rain pelted the windows of Copper Cedar Wildlife Haven. The clock on Hollis Keene's desk blinked out along with every other light in the building, plunging the sanctuary into darkness. She grabbed her flashlight and raincoat, knowing she needed to check on the animals, especially during a storm this severe. "Easy there," she murmured, to the nervous chitters coming from the recovery rooms as she made her rounds. The beam of her flashlight swept across familiar cages and enclosures, checking that everyone was safe and secure. When she reached the creek that ran along the sanctuary's border, something caught her attention, a sound that didn't belong. Above the rainfall and wind, she heard labored breathing and the distinctive clinking of metal on metal. Hollis moved carefully toward the sound, her boots squelching in the mud. The beam of her flashlight finally landed on a sight that made her heart stop. A magnificent leopard, its spotted coat slick with rain and blood, thrashing against a cruel steel snare that bit into its leg. Her hands trembled as she pulled out her phone and dialed Dr. Greer Laramie's number. "Greer, I need you here now. We've got a leopard caught in the snare by the creek. She's losing blood." "A leopard?" Greer's voice crackled through the static. "I'm on my way. Don't approach it alone." While waiting, Hollis kept her light trained on the big cat, speaking in soft, steady tones. The leopard's golden eyes reflected back at her, filled with both fear and an unsettling intelligence. Despite its predicament, there was something deliberate in the way it watched her. 20 minutes later, Greer's truck splashed through the puddles in the parking lot. She hurried over with her medical kit and headlamp, her glasses already spotted. "With rain, this is impossible," she muttered, crouching beside Hollis. "There shouldn't be any leopards within 1,000 miles of here." Together, they worked in the beam of their headlamps. Greer prepared a sedative while Hollis kept watch, ready with cable cutters. The leopard's breathing grew more labored, its struggles weakening. "Easy, girl," Greer murmured as she administered the sedative. "We're going to help you." Once the big cat was unconscious, they could see the full extent of the damage. The snare had cut deep into muscle and tissue. Hollis's hands shook with anger as she cut through the steel cable. This was deliberately set. Someone knew exactly what they were doing. Greer cleaned and dressed the wound as best she could in the dark, her practiced hands moving quickly. "She's lucky you found her." Much longer in this trap, by early morning, word had somehow spread about their midnight rescue. Hollis's phone wouldn't stop ringing. Local news vans parked outside the sanctuary gates, and county officials demanded answers about an escaped exotic predator. The worst call came from Dorian Pike, whose sprawling ranch bordered the sanctuary's land. His voice oozed false concern. "Now, Ms. Keene, you know we can't have dangerous animals roaming free. Think of the livestock, the children. This needs to be handled properly." "The proper authorities have been notified," Hollis replied stiffly. "Federal wildlife agents are on their way." "Hours away, I hear," Pike said smoothly. "Meanwhile, that beast is out there somewhere. The county has a responsibility to remove such threats." Before Hollis could argue further, she received urgent news. The leopard had vanished. Despite its injuries, it had somehow slipped away into the dense brush while they were waiting for backup to arrive. The empty recovery cage mocked her as dawn broke over the sanctuary. Her boss called her into his office as soon as he arrived. "Do you understand the liability you've created?" he demanded. "A non-native predator loose in the county? The press is having a field day." "That animal was deliberately trapped," Hollis insisted. "Someone brought it here, and we need to find out who. What we need is to contain this situation," he snapped. "Pike's already talking about lawsuits if any of his precious cattle get touched." Hollis stood her ground. "That leopard was injured and scared. She needs help, not hunters." But she could feel the weight of judgment pressing down as the storm. Clouds finally broke, and sunlight streamed through the windows. The sanctuary would open soon, and already she could hear the whispers, reckless, irresponsible, in over her head. As she walked the grounds, checking on the other animals, Hollis replayed the night in her mind. The leopard's intelligent gaze, the deliberate way it had watched them work, the professionally made snare that had trapped it. None of it added up to a simple case of an escaped exotic pet. Something bigger was happening here, and that leopard was the key to uncovering it all. She paused by the creek where they'd found the cat, now busy with birdsong in the aftermath of the storm. The morning light revealed traces of blood on broken foliage, leading into the deeper brush. Somewhere out there, an injured leopard was hiding, carrying secrets that someone clearly wanted to keep hidden. Hollis touched the cable cutters still in her pocket and straightened her shoulders. She'd made the right choice, no matter what anyone said. Now she just had to prove it. The morning sun beat down on Hollis's shoulders as she crouched near the tree line, studying fresh paw prints in the mud. 3 days had passed since the storm, and criticism was mounting from all sides. But these tracks told her she wasn't crazy. The leopard was still out there. She pulled out her phone and snapped photos of the prints, measuring them carefully against her palm. The earth around them was torn up, suggesting the cat had been running. But from what, or to where? "Miss Keene?" A deep voice called from behind her. She turned to find Cormac Bell, their neighbor from the adjacent ranch, walking toward her. His weathered face was creased with concern beneath his dusty hat. "Been meaning to talk to you about that cat." Hollis straightened up, brushing dirt from her knees. "Most people around here are just telling me to forget about it." "Well, I saw that snare you pulled off her." Cormac's voice dropped lower. "I recognize that crimp pattern in cable style. That's Pike's work. Been using the same supplier for 20 years. A chill ran through Hollis despite the warm morning. "You sound pretty certain about that." "Should be. Used to manage his North Ranch." Cormac shifted uncomfortably. "Left about 5 years ago. Some things didn't sit right." Hollis studied him carefully. "Would you help me?" "I'm setting up trail cameras, trying to track her movements." Over the next few hours, they worked together, mounting cameras at strategic points along the property line. Cormac knew exactly where to place them, near water sources, along game trails, anywhere a big cat might pass. 3 days later, Hollis sat at her computer, scrolling through hundreds of nighttime images. Most showed deer, raccoons, the occasional coyote. Then she stopped, her breath catching. There, a distinctive spotted form slipping like a ghost along Pike's fence line. "Got you," she whispered, zooming in on the image. The leopard moved with purpose, clearly familiar with the territory. Her small victory was short-lived. The next morning, her phone exploded with messages. 2 calves had gone missing from Pike's ranch overnight. By afternoon, Pike had launched a full-scale media assault. "This reckless sanctuary worker has put every ranch family in danger," Pike's smooth voice declared on the local news. "Who's going to be responsible when this killer cat comes after our children?" Hollis's hands clenched into fists as she watched the broadcast. The camera panned across concerned faces at a hastily assembled town hall meeting. Pike stood at the podium, perfectly composed in his expensive suit, playing to the crowd's fears. Her boss called her into his office the next morning. "The county officials contacted me," he said. running a hand through his thinning hair. If that cat is spotted near any pasture land, they're issuing a kill order. No questions asked. But sir, Hollis started. I know. But our hands are tied. Pike's got influence with the commissioner's office. Maybe it's time to let this one go. Hollis stood up, her voice firm. Something's not right here. Those missing calves, the trap locations. This is too organized for a random cat. She's being drawn to something. Hollis, her boss's voice held a warning. I need 48 hours, she insisted. Let me prove there's more going on. Back at her desk, she spread out a map, marking every location where she'd found tracks or camera evidence. A pattern emerged, the leopard's movements all centered. Around the far corner of Pike's property, an area blocked from view by thick brush and a sharp rise in the land. She called Cormac, who studied the map in silence. That section, he said finally, pointing to the corner. Pike keeps it off limits. Claims it's for specialty breeding stock. His face darkened. Never did see many actual cattle back there, though. Hollis leaned forward. What exactly made you leave his employ, Mr. Bell? Cormac was quiet for a long moment. Let's just say some shipments came in that weren't listed on any official manifests. And the sounds coming from those trailers at night weren't any livestock I'd ever heard. Together, they reviewed more trail cam footage. The timestamps revealed a pattern. The Leopard appeared most active on nights when there was unusual traffic on the back road leading to Pike's restricted area. She knows something, Hollis said softly, watching the big cat's purposeful movements. She's not just hunting. She's watching that corner of his property like she's looking for something specific. Or someone, Cormac added quietly. A knock on her office door made them both jump. Her boss stood there, his face grave. County sheriff just called. Pike's ranch hands reported seeing the leopard near their main pasture this morning. The kill order's been approved. They're assembling a team now. Hollis felt her heart sink, but her resolve only strengthened. The evidence was adding up. The suspicious shipments, the restricted area, the leopard's focused behavior. This was bigger than one escaped cat. Now she just had to prove it before time ran out. Sir, she said, standing up straight. I need to show you something. She spread out the map with all her documented evidence. This isn't about a dangerous predator. I think we're looking at something much more organized and much more illegal. She laid out everything. The pattern of the leopard's movements, Cormac's testimony about the suspicious shipments, the connection between the trap placement and Pike's property. Give me a chance to expose what's really happening here, she pleaded, before they kill an innocent animal who might be the key to uncovering something much worse. The morning sun beat down as Hollis and Cormac followed a set of deep tire tracks leading away from Pike's main compound. The ruts carved through tall grass, winding toward an old feed shed that sat forgotten at the edge of his leased property. Hollis noticed how the grass had been repeatedly flattened, suggesting regular traffic despite the building's seemingly abandoned state. Look here, Cormac said, pointing to fresh oil spots on the packed earth. Someone's been making regular trips. The shed's exterior was weathered gray, its metal walls streaked with rust. A heavy padlock secured the main door, but around back, they found a smaller entrance with a simpler mechanism. Cormac examined it closely, his weathered hands tracing the edge of the frame. Same Loctite Pike uses on his specialty pens, he muttered. I still have the spare key from my managing days. He pulled out a ring of keys, hands slightly shaking as he tried one. The door creaked open, releasing a sharp chemical smell that made them both step back. Hollis pulled out her flashlight, its beam cutting through the musty darkness. What they found inside made her breath catch. A massive transport crate dominated one corner, its metal frame easily large enough to hold a full-grown leopard. Stacked wooden pallets lined the walls, each bearing international shipping codes and faded customs. Stamps. The floor showed dark stains despite a strong smell of industrial disinfectant that burned their nostrils. "This changes everything," Hollis whispered, pulling out her phone to document the scene. She photographed every angle of the crate, careful to capture its dimensions. The shipping codes on the pallets told a story of international transport. Far beyond the scope of regular ranch operations, Cormac moved through the space like a man in a trance, his face growing darker with each discovery. "I knew he was bringing in exotic animals, but this," he gestured to the sophisticated setup. "This is a whole operation. A pipeline." Hollis's camera clicked rapidly as she cataloged everything: the ventilation system, the drainage setup, even the specific brand of disinfectant used. Her hands trembled slightly as she realized the full scope of what they'd uncovered. This wasn't about one escaped leopard, it was about organized trafficking. Back in her truck, she pulled up the contact information for Special Agent Arden Coyle, who had given her a card after the initial leopard incident. The call went through after. "2 rings, Agent Coyle. This is Hollis Keene from Copper Cedar Wildlife Haven. We found something you need to see." 20 minutes later, Agent Coyle's government-issue SUV pulled up beside them. The agent's crisp appearance contrasted sharply with the rustic surroundings. As she surveyed the shed's contents, her expression carefully neutral. "This suggests a smuggling operation," Coyle said, examining the shipping codes. "But we need more than circumstantial evidence. Pike's lawyers will argue this is just storage for his legitimate livestock business unless we can prove direct connections to live exotic animals." Hollis felt frustration building in her chest. But the crate size, the international stamps, all could be explained away, Coyle interrupted gently. "We need documents showing provenance of illegal animals, or better yet, actual exotic wildlife on his property. Without that, his influence with local officials will bury any investigation before it starts." Cormac spoke up, his voice rough with emotion. "I saw things when I worked for him. Heard things, but never had proof." Agent Coyle turned to him sharply. "Would you be willing to make a formal statement about what you witnessed?" He nodded slowly. "Been carrying that guilt too long. Time to set it right." "Keep documenting everything," Coyle instructed Hollis. "Every detail matters: dimensions, dates, patterns of activity. But please, no confrontations. Pike's dangerous when cornered, and he's got friends in high places." After the agent left, Hollis and Cormac spent another hour measuring and photographing every detail of the shed. The crate's dimensions matched exactly what would be needed for a large cat. The international shipping codes told a story of movements from Asia and Africa. Even the specific setup for waste disposal indicated knowledge of exotic animal transport requirements. "We're close," Hollis said, reviewing the photos on her camera. "All these pieces, they're adding up to something bigger than anyone suspected." She looked at Cormac. "Thank you for helping. I know this isn't easy for you." He stared at the crate for a long moment. "Should have spoken up sooner." "Maybe then," he trailed off, then straightened his shoulders. "Well, better late than never. That leopard out there, she might be the key to bringing this whole thing down." Hollis nodded, her determination growing stronger. They had the shell of the operation exposed now: the logistics, the equipment, the international connections. What they needed was the final piece: proof of live animals moving through this pipeline. She carefully tucked her camera away, knowing that every photo, every measurement, every documented detail brought them one step closer to exposure Pike's true operation. The weeks dragged by with no sign of the leopard. Hollis spent countless hours reviewing trail cam footage that showed nothing but deer and raccoons. Her hopes of finding concrete evidence against Pike dimmed with each passing day. Then, on a misty morning just before sunrise, a soft thump on her porch jolted Hollis awake. She grabbed her flashlight and peered through the window. There, in the gray dawn light, stood the leopard. The big cat's golden eyes met hers with an unsettling intelligence. The snare wound on her leg had mostly healed, but she still favored it slightly. Hollis's heart hammered in her chest. She moved slowly to the door, expecting the leopard to bolt. But the cat remained still, watching. When Hollis cracked the door open, the leopard took 3 deliberate steps backward, then turned away. She paused, looking over her shoulder as if waiting. "You want me to follow you," Hollis whispered, hardly believing what she was seeing. Leopard padded through the wet grass, her tail held low but steady. Hollis grabbed her phone and followed at a careful distance. They moved through the misty dawn, past the sanctuary's boundary and toward Pike's property. The cat led her to a large drainage culvert that ran under Pike's back fence. The leopard disappeared into the dark tunnel. Water from recent rains rushed through the bottom of the culvert. Hollis switched on her flashlight and waded in. The cold water rose to her chest, soaking her clothes. She shivered but pressed forward, using the concrete walls for balance. 20 feet in, the beam of her flashlight caught movement. On a raised shelf built into the culvert's side wall, 2 small leopard cubs huddled together. Their ribs showed through their spotted coats. The mother leopard stood over them protectively, but there was no aggression in her posture. "Oh my God," Hollis breathed. She moved closer, and in her flashlight beam, she spotted something unexpected. A fresh wound on one cub's ear, the telltale mark of a recently inserted microchip. With trembling fingers, Hollis pulled out her phone and opened the microchip scanning app she used at the sanctuary. When she held it near the cub, the screen lit up with information. The registration linked to a company called Global Livestock Holdings LLC, a shell company, Hollis muttered. She recognized the pattern. Traffickers often used legitimate-sounding business names to mask their illegal operations. The mother leopard moved past her cubs, walking further along the shelf. She stopped at what looked like a metal utility box mounted to the wall. The cat batted at it with her paw. Hollis approached cautiously and found the box was actually a waterproof locker. Inside, she discovered a stack of export manifests, shipping documents for specialty livestock. The dates, locations, and identification numbers created a clear paper trail. But what made Hollis gasp was a small screen showing a live security camera feed. The footage showed the interior of a barn she didn't recognize. Inside were multiple large transport crates, and in those crates, she could make out the moving shapes of big cats. Hollis's hands shook as she used her phone to photograph everything. The documents, the camera feed, the cubs, and the microchip information. This was it. The evidence they needed to bring Pike down. The mother leopard hadn't come seeking help for herself. She had deliberately led Hollis to her cubs and to proof of Pike's trafficking operation. "You knew exactly what you were doing," Hollis said softly to the leopard. The big cat watched her with those knowing eyes, standing guard over her cubs, who had begun to stir with more energy at their mother's return. The magnitude of what she'd discovered made Hollis's head spin. Here was everything Special Agent Coyle needed: microchip records, shipping documents, and live video evidence of more captive cats. Pike's entire operation was about to unravel, and it was all thanks to a mother leopard who had trusted her enough to show her the truth. Hollis took one final set of photos, making sure every detail was clearly captured. The cubs mewed softly in the background as their mother settled beside them, her watchful gaze never leaving Hollis. The scene struck her with its profound significance. A wild mother's desperation and intelligence had accomplished what weeks of human investigation could not. As the morning light began to filter into the culvert's entrance, Hollis knew she needed to act quickly. She had to get this evidence to Agent Coyle before Pike discovered anyone had been here. She took one last look at the leopard family, silently promising to return with help. The mother leopard blinked slowly at her, a gesture that felt like acknowledgement. The storm clouds gathered ominously as Hollis pulled her Mud splattered truck into position behind the abandoned feed shed. Her hands trembled slightly on the steering wheel, but her resolve remained steady. Special Agent Coyle had finally given them the green light for action after reviewing the evidence from the Cubs and hidden locker. Now everything hinged on perfect timing. Dr. Greer Laramie sat beside her in the passenger seat, methodically checking her medical kit. The veterinarian's quiet confidence helped steady Hollis's nerves. In the back seat, Cormac Bell gripped the bolt cutters, his weathered face grim with determination. "Remember," Hollis whispered, though there was no need for silence yet with the thunder rolling overhead. "Coyle's team is in position on all sides. We go in, we get the cats, we get out. Clean and quick." Greer nodded, double-checking the doses of sedative she'd prepared. "The pregnant female will need special handling. I've adjusted the medication accordingly." The first fat drops of rain began to fall as they made their final preparations. Cormac tested his radio with a soft click. "Agent Coyle, we're in position." "Copy that," came the agent's steady voice. "My teams are ready. You have your 20-minute window. Make it count." The rain intensified, providing them with natural cover as they approached the barn. Their boots squelched in the mud, but the drumming downpour masked any sound. Hollis led the way, her heart pounding as she recalled the layout she'd memorized from the surveillance feed. At the side door, Cormac made quick work of the padlock. The metal groaned, then gave way under the bolt cutters. Inside, the barn was dim and humid, filled with the musty smell of hay and the distinct scent of big cats. A sudden flash of lightning illuminated the interior, revealing rows of transport cages and the ominous shape of a guillotine gate system designed to trap anyone trying to access the main holding area. Hollis's breath caught as she spotted the control panel, its red light blinking in warning. "There's the timer," she whispered, pointing to the digital display. "We've got 8 minutes before it cycles." Greer moved toward the side stall where they'd seen the pregnant leopard on the feed. The power flickered ominously, making the overhead lights sputter and spark. The storm was intensifying. "Careful," Cormac warned as an electrical conduit near the ceiling began to hiss and pop. "This whole place is jerry-rigged." Hollis knew she had to reach the mother leopard's pen before the gate system activated. Taking a deep breath, she dropped to her stomach and crawled under the sparking conduit. The concrete floor was cold and damp against her clothes, but she pressed forward. The mother leopard recognized her immediately. The big cat's golden eyes fixed on Hollis with an almost human intelligence. There was no aggression in her posture, only watchful waiting. "I've got you," Hollis murmured, working on the pen's locking mechanism. "Just like before, girl. We're getting you out of here." Behind her, she could hear Greer preparing the sedative for the pregnant female. The vet's movements were swift and sure as she loaded the dart gun. "Ready when you are," Greer called softly. Cormac stationed himself by the control panel, watching the timer count down. 5 minutes, he reported tensely. The mother leopard backed away from the door as Hollis finally worked it open. Unlike the pregnant cat, this one wouldn't need sedation. She'd already proven she would cooperate. A particularly loud crack of thunder made them all jump. The lights flickered again, longer this time, threatening to plunge them into darkness. In the side stall, Greer took her shot. The dart found its mark, and the pregnant leopard growled once before the sedative began to take effect. "Gate's about to trigger," Cormac warned. He jammed the control panel with a tool he'd brought, shorting out the timer. "That should buy us a few more minutes." Working quickly now, they prepared both cats for transport. The mother leopard walked calmly into the waiting carrier, while Greer monitored the sedated female's vital signs as they carefully moved her. Their radios crackled to life. "Movement at the north end," Coyle's voice reported. "Finish up and clear out. Now." Hollis's heart raced as they secured the carriers. They'd done it. Both cats were safe, and they had all the evidence they needed from the barn's setup to prove Pike's involvement in the trafficking operation. The rain continued to pour as they loaded the carriers into their vehicles. Every movement careful but urgent. Thunder boomed overhead, but Hollis could have sworn she heard engines in the distance. "We're clear," she radioed to Coyle, her voice shaking with relief and adrenaline. Both cats secured. For one breathless moment, as they pulled away from the barn with their precious cargo, it seemed they had actually pulled it off. The mother leopard would be reunited with her cubs, the pregnant female would receive proper care, and Pike's operation was about to come crashing down around him. The storm raged on, but inside the truck, despite the tension still thrumming through their bodies, Hollis, Greer, and Cormac shared a look of fierce satisfaction. They'd done what needed to be done, and they'd done it right. The drive back should have been triumphant. Instead, sheets of rain hammered the rescue vehicle as Hollis cradled the carrier containing one of the sedated cubs. Dr. Laramie kept watch over the pregnant cat in the larger transport crate, while Cormac navigated the treacherous back roads. With careful precision, lightning split the sky, illuminating the flood-swollen creek ahead. The low-water crossing looked passable, barely. Cormac eased onto the concrete pad, water lapping at the tires. "Almost there," he murmured, knuckles white on the steering wheel. The impact came without warning. Pike's massive truck slammed into their side with devastating force. Metal screamed against metal. The world spun violently as their vehicle flipped, then crashed into the surging water. Icy water rushed in through shattered windows. Hollis found herself trapped, her seatbelt jammed tight across her chest. The carrier with the cub was slipping from her grasp. With desperate strength, she held it above the rising water, fighting to keep the small creature breathing. "Hold on." Cormac's voice was thick with pain. Blood trickled down his face from where his head had struck the window. Despite his obvious concussion, he was already moving, tearing at his seatbelt. Water continued to pour in. Hollis could hear Dr. Laramie struggling in the back with the larger crate. The pregnant cat's sedated sounds mixed with the rushing water. Get the others first," Hollis gasped, still holding the carrier high. Her arms burned with the effort. Through the rain-streaked darkness, Pike's tall figure approached. The shotgun in his hands gleamed dully in the storm. His voice boomed over the roar of water and wind. "Should have minded your own business, Keen," he shouted. "Some things aren't meant to be saved." Cormac had managed to force his door open against the current. He splashed through knee-deep water to Hollis's side, fingers scrambling against her. Jammed door. The glass was spider-webbed with cracks. "It's stuck," he grunted, pulling with all his might. "The frame's bent." Pike's boots crunched on broken glass as he drew closer. "Step away, Belle. This doesn't have to include you." The shotgun leveled at Hollis's window. Water was up to her chest now, numbing cold seeping into her bones. Still, she didn't lower the carrier. The cub's life meant too much to give up now. A flash of movement caught her eye. A sleek shape emerged from the brush beside the road, the mother leopard. Her golden eyes reflected the lightning. Focused entirely on Pike, she moved with deadly purpose, muscles rippling under her wet coat. Pike never saw her coming. The leopard launched herself onto the road with explosive power. Her sudden appearance made Pike stumble backward, the shotgun wavering as he tried to track this new threat. Those precious seconds of distraction were all they needed. Red and blue lights suddenly pierced the darkness. Sirens wailed as Agent Coyle's vehicles converged on the scene. The tracking device they'd planted had led them straight to the crisis. "Federal agents, drop the weapon." Coyle's voice cut through the chaos. Pike's face contorted with rage. He fired once into the air before turning and sprinting toward his truck. The leopard melted back into the brush as agents poured out of their vehicles. "He's heading for the private airstrip." Cormac shouted, finally managing to wrench Hollis's door open. She tumbled out into the flood water, still clutching the carrier. Dr. Laramie had gotten the back door open and was working to secure the pregnant cat's crate. Debris from the crash littered the road, broken glass, twisted metal, and scattered medical supplies mixing with the swirling water. Coyle split her team, sending half after Pike while others rushed to help the survivors. Hollis's legs barely held her as she sloshed to higher ground. Her whole body shook with cold and adrenaline, but the cub in the carrier was safe, mewling softly. "Everyone alive?" Coyle demanded, helping Dr. Laramie with the larger crate. They nodded, too exhausted for words. Cormac pressed a hand to his bleeding head, wavering slightly. Hollis reached out to steady him, their eyes meeting in silent acknowledgement of how close they'd come to death. In the distance, more sirens wailed as backup units converged on Pike's airstrip. The storm continued to rage, but they had survived, humans and animals alike. The mother leopard had disappeared as quickly as she'd appeared, her intervention having given them the crucial moments they needed. Hollis looked down at the carrier in her arms, then out at the wild darkness where the mother leopard had vanished. Sometimes salvation came from the most unexpected sources, and tonight, they'd all been saved by the very creature they'd first set out to protect. The flashing lights of emergency vehicles pierced the rain-soaked darkness. Hollis sat wrapped in a thermal blanket on the tailgate of an ambulance, her clothes still dripping from the near drowning at the crossing. Her hands trembled, not from cold, but from the memory of holding that carrier above the rising water, fighting to keep the cub alive as the flood tried to claim them both. Special Agent Arden Coyle approached, her expression grim but determined. "We need to move fast," she said, pulling out her phone. "Pike's got a head start, but he'll need his records before he can disappear completely. Without a map to where he keeps them, we're searching blind." Cormac Bell stood a few feet away, his face half hidden by shadows. He hadn't said much since they'd been pulled from the wreck. Now he stepped forward, water dripping from his jacket, his voice heavy with resolve. "I know where to look," he said quietly. Hollis turned to face him, confusion creasing her brow. Cormac wouldn't meet her eyes at first, his shoulders hunched, as if carrying an invisible weight. "I worked for Pike," he continued, each word seeming to cost him, years back. "I managed his exotic animal operation. Kept the books, arranged transport, everything." He swallowed hard. "I knew what was happening wasn't right, but I told myself it wasn't my business. When it got too much, I just walked away, didn't speak up, didn't try to stop it." The silence that followed was broken only by the steady drum of rain on metal. Hollis stared at him, processing this revelation. All those times he'd helped her track the leopard, he'd known more than he'd let on. The betrayal stung, but there was something else in his confession, a chance to make things right. "I've carried that guilt ever since," Cormac said, finally, meeting her gaze. "Watching from the sidelines, telling myself it wasn't my fight anymore. But tonight, seeing you all risk everything to save those cats," he straightened up. "I'm done being on the fence. I know his operation inside and out, the routes, the storage locations, names of buyers and suppliers. Everything you need to bring him down." Agent Coyle stepped closer, her interest sharp. "You're willing to go on record with this?" "Yes, ma'am." Cormac nodded. "Should have done it years ago." Hollis stood up, shrugging off the blanket. The practical part of her mind was already calculating how to use this information, even as another part struggled with the revelation of Cormac's past involvement. "We need those records," she said firmly. "The microchip registry was just the start. If we can match it with his shipping manifests—" "There's a storage unit," Cormac interrupted. "Off Highway 27, behind the old feed store. Pike keeps his backup records there. Papers going back 5 years at least." Coyle was already on her radio, calling in backup. "We'll need a warrant," she said. "But with the evidence we already have from the locker, that won't be a problem." Within 30 minutes, they had the warrant. Cormac led them to a nondescript storage facility on the outskirts of town. The unit itself was unremarkable, just another metal door in a row of identical ones, but the contents proved invaluable. "Here," Cormac said, pulling out a stack of folders. International shipping manifests, veterinary certificates, buyer contracts, all of it carefully documented. Pike was always methodical about his paperwork, even if he was breaking every wildlife. Law on the books. Hollis and Agent Coyle worked quickly, comparing the documents to photos they'd taken of the materials found in the hidden locker. The matching details were undeniable. Dates, identification numbers, even the shell company names aligned perfectly. "The microchip numbers," Hollis said, pointing to a series of entries. "They match the cubs we rescued. This proves the connection between Pike and the trafficking operation." Coyle nodded, satisfaction evident in her expression. "This is what we needed. With these records and your testimony," she glanced at Cormac, "we can shut down not just Pike's operation, but his entire network." As they carefully documented and bagged the evidence, Hollis found herself standing next to Cormac. The rain had finally begun to ease, but the weight of the night's revelations hung heavy between them. "Why now?" she asked quietly. "After all." This time, Cormac's weathered face showed every year of the burden he'd carried. "Because sometimes you get a second chance to do the right thing," he said. "And if you're lucky enough to get that chance, you'd better take it." Agent Coyle approached them, her arms full of documented evidence. "The path's clear now," she said. "All roads lead to that private airstrip. That's where Pike will make his last stand." She looked at Cormac. "We'll need everything you know about the layout, security systems, escape routes, all of it." Cormac nodded, no hesitation left in his manner. He'd chosen his side at last, and there would be no turning back. The evidence they'd gathered, combined with his insider knowledge, would form the key that would finally unlock and expose Pike's entire operation. As they loaded the last of the records into Coyle's vehicle, Hollis realized that sometimes redemption came in unexpected forms. Cormac's past choices had enabled Pike's cruelty, but his present courage might prove to be the turning point in bringing it all to an end. Rain pelted the private airstrip's tarmac as federal vehicles converged from all directions, their headlights cutting through the pre-dawn darkness. The wind had picked up, making the small plane's tie-downs creak and rattle. Special Agent Arden Coyle's voice crackled over the radio, coordinating teams into position around the hangar's perimeter. Hollis gripped the tranquilizer rifle close, her heart pounding as she moved forward with Coyle's tactical unit. The documents they'd recovered from Cormac's intel painted a clear picture. This airstrip was Pike's primary transport hub for his exotic animal trafficking operation. Through the driving rain, they spotted Pike's truck parked haphazardly near the hangar entrance. The building's floodlights cast harsh shadows, and the whine of a plane engine starting up inside carried over the storm. "He's making a run for it," Coyle said through clenched teeth, gesturing teams forward. Before they could close the gap, the hangar doors burst open. Pike emerged, but he wasn't alone. He had a chain leash wrapped around his fist, attached to a clearly terrified leopard. The big cat's eyes were wide with panic, its muscles bunched and trembling. "That's close enough," Pike shouted over the strengthening wind. Behind him, propeller wash from the warming aircraft threw water and debris in violent circles. Hollis's breath caught in her throat. The leopard wasn't the mother they'd rescued. This was another cat, likely one Pike had kept in reserve. Its fear was making it unpredictable, exactly what Pike wanted as a shield. "It's over, Pike," Coyle called out, her weapon trained but unable to risk a shot with the animal in play. "We have the manifests, the surveillance footage, everything from the shed and the barn. Stand down before this gets worse." Pike's laugh was bitter and sharp. "Worse? I've built this operation for 20 years. You think I'll just hand it over?" He yanked the chain, making the leopard snarl. "One wrong move and I'll make sure this cat takes someone with me." Hollis watched the leopard's movement, remembering every detail from her years of working with big cats. This one was young, powerful, but also confused and scared. Pike was counting on chaos, but chaos could work both ways. She caught Coyle's eye and gave a slight nod. The agent understood, subtly shifting position to draw Pike's attention while Hollis eased to the side, bringing the tranquilizer rifle to her shoulder. The chips matched the registry documents, Coyle continued, keeping Pike focused forward. We've got your whole pipeline mapped, the shell companies, the forged permits, all of it. Your network is being rolled up as we speak. The wind gusted harder, making the Leopard even more agitated. Pike had to struggle to maintain his grip on the chain. You've got nothing but paper, he snarled. And I've got friends in every office that matters. In a week, those papers will disappear, just like Hollis didn't let him finish. In one fluid motion, she lined up her shot and squeezed the trigger. The dart found its mark in the Leopard's shoulder, perfectly placed for rapid absorption. The cat jerked, then stumbled, its panic giving way to chemical calm. Pike tried to use the chain to pull the Leopard up, but the sedative worked fast. The big cat sank to the wet tarmac, and in that moment of distraction, Coyle's team rushed in. Pike reached for something in his jacket, but two agents tackled him before he could grab it. The chain slipped from his grip as they drove him to the ground. Secure the suspect, Coyle barked, moving in as handcuffs clicked into place. And get that plane's pilot. Hollis hurried to the sedated Leopard, checking its breathing and pulse. Everything was strong and steady. She ran her hand over its spotted coat, feeling the powerful muscle beneath, now relaxed in chemical sleep. This cat, like the others, would have a chance at a better life now. Pike struggled and cursed as the agents hauled him to his feet. His carefully tailored suit was soaked and muddy, his usual polished demeanor shattered. You have no idea what you've done, he spat at Hollis. This operation kept half the county employed. What we've done, Coyle said, stepping close to Pike, is shut down an international trafficking ring that exploited protected species and endangered both animals and people. Your employment program is over. More vehicles arrived, transport, vans for both human and animal suspects, evidence teams, additional agents. The storm was beginning to ease as dawn approached, the wind dropping to a whisper. Hollis helped the veterinary team transfer the sleeping Leopard onto a stretcher, ensuring its airways remained clear. Good shot, Coyle said, joining her as Pike was led away. Clean and precise, exactly what we needed to end this without bloodshed. Hollis nodded, watching the cat's steady breathing. These animals deserve better than being used as weapons or contraband. They deserve a chance to live with dignity. The federal teams worked efficiently in the growing light, securing the scene and beginning to process evidence. The manifests and documents they'd recovered would take weeks to fully analyze, but the preliminary matches to the microchip registry and surveillance footage had already confirmed the scope of Pike's operation. His entire transport chain was exposed, and similar raids were happening at connected sites across 3 states. Pike's last gambit had failed. The sleeping Leopard beside his handcuffed form was a fitting symbol of how his power over these creatures had finally been broken. The long night of storms and revelations was ending, giving way to a dawn that promised justice, both for the people who had fought to expose the truth, and for the animals who had suffered in silence. The wheels of justice turned swiftly in the weeks following Pike's arrest. The evidence was overwhelming: shipping manifests, international wire transfers, and dozens of microchip records created an airtight case that even Pike's expensive lawyers couldn't crack. The prosecution moved efficiently, presenting document after document that tracked his illegal exotic animal pipeline across 3 continents. In the courthouse, Hollis watched from the gallery as Pike's empire crumbled. The man who once strutted around in sharp suits now sat subdued in prison orange, his shoulders slumped as the judge read out the lengthy list of federal violations. The sentence came down hard. 15 years in federal prison, plus millions in fines and asset forfeitures. But the true victory came in what happened to Pike's blood money. The court ordered his seized assets be redirected to support accredited wildlife sanctuaries and rehabilitation centers. Copper Cedar Wildlife Haven received a substantial grant to expand their emergency medical facilities, a fitting turnabout that would help future animals in crisis. On a quiet morning 3 weeks after the sentencing, Hollis made her way to the temporary enclosure where the mother leopard and her cubs were being housed before their transfer to a permanent sanctuary. The difference in the animals was striking. Gone were the protruding ribs and dull coats. Under proper care, they had transformed. The cubs, once trembling and weak in that dark covert, now tumbled and played with the boundless energy of healthy young cats. Hollis approached the enclosure fence slowly, respecting the invisible boundary between human and wild. The mother leopard noticed her immediately, those intelligent golden eyes fixing on Hollis's face. The big cat rose from where she'd been watching her cubs, moving with the fluid grace that had returned to her restored muscles. The memory of that stormy night, finding her trapped and bleeding in the steel snare, felt distant now. The ugly scar remained on the leopard's leg, but it had healed clean. The cat paced along the fence line, her movements calm and deliberate. Then, in a moment that made Hollis's breath catch, she settled down right at the fence's edge, meeting Hollis's gaze without a trace of fear. Time seemed to still. Here they were, the Storm Knight rescuer and the once snared predator, sharing a quiet moment of mutual recognition. The leopard's trust felt earned, born from that first choice to help rather than harm, and all the dangerous nights that followed. Her cubs wrestled nearby, secure in their mother's certainty that this human meant no threat. Dr. Laramie approached with the final transfer paperwork, her footsteps crunching on the gravel. "Pretty amazing transformation, isn't it?" she said softly, handing Hollis the clipboard. Hollis nodded, signing her name on the chain of custody forms. These documents would ensure the family's safe transport to a sanctuary in Colorado, one with sprawling habitat space and experienced exotic cat specialists. "They deserve this chance," she said. "A real home, not a cage. You made it happen," Laramie reminded her. "By refusing to back down when everyone said to look the other way. By following the evidence even when it put you at risk." Hollis watched the cubs tumble over their mother, who endured their antics with regal patience. "She made it happen too," she said quietly. "She knew where to find help. Let us write to those documents that broke the case open." The mother leopard's ear twitched at Hollis's voice, her gaze still steady and calm. This was how it should end, not with dramatic showdowns or public spectacle, but with quiet healing, with an outcome that prioritized safety and dignity for creatures who had suffered enough at human hands. Tomorrow, the transport team would arrive to move the family to their new home. But for now, Hollis simply stood witness to this peaceful moment. The storm had passed. Justice had been served. And in the end, doing what was right had made all the difference. When Hollis finally turned to leave, she carried with her the memory of that steady golden gaze, a reminder that sometimes the greatest victories come not from force, but from holding firm to what you know is right, even when the path seems darkest. The mother leopard had trusted her instincts about where to find help, and Hollis had trusted her own instincts about fighting for justice, no matter the cost. Together, they had brought down a criminal empire and secured a future where these magnificent creatures could live as they were meant to, wild and free. The afternoon sun cast long shadows across Copper Cedar Wildlife Haven as Hollis Keene walked the familiar paths between enclosures. 3 weeks had passed since Pike's arrest, and the sanctuary grounds felt different now, calmer, as if the land itself could sense that justice had been served. Director Matthews caught up with her near the main office, his usual stern expression softened by what looked almost like pride. "Hollis, got a minute?" She nodded, brushing dust from her work jacket. "The Fish and Wildlife Service was impressed by your work on the pike case," he said, handing her an official-looking envelope. "They're offering you a position coordinating illegal trap interdiction across the state. Full authority, your own team." Hollis turned the envelope over in her hands, feeling the weight of the opportunity. It was the kind of recognition she'd waited years to receive, validation that her instincts and dedication meant something. "I know it's a big change," Matthews continued, "but you've earned it. No one else has your experience with what these traps can do." She thought of the leopard's scarred leg, of all the other animals she'd treated over the years who'd fallen victim to illegal snares and traps. "I'll take it," she said firmly. "But I'm not leaving the sanctuary. This can be home base for the new program." Matthews smiled. "I hoped you'd say that. We need you here too." Across the sanctuary, Dr. Greer Laramie was back to her usual rounds, checking on a recovering hawk with careful hands. The vet looked up as Hollis approached, pushing her forever smudged glasses up her nose. "Heard about the new position," Greer said. "Congratulations, you'll be perfect for it." "Thanks." Hollis leaned against the examination table. "Things feeling more normal again, as normal as they get around here." Greer's eyes crinkled with amusement. "Though I have to admit, Midnight Leopard Rescue makes regular checkups seem a bit tame." They shared a knowing laugh, the kind that comes after surviving something extraordinary together. Later that afternoon, Hollis found Cormac Bell mending a fence line near the property edge. He'd been quiet since his confession about working for Pike, but he'd stayed on, choosing to face his past rather than run from it. "Need a hand?" she asked, picking up a spare pair of work gloves. Cormac nodded, making space for her along the fence. They worked in comfortable silence for a while, the rhythm of hammering and measuring familiar and grounding. "I've been thinking," he finally said, "about staying on permanent. If you'll have me." Hollis studied him for a moment. The guilt still showed in his eyes, but there was something else there too. Determination, maybe. Or hope. "We could use someone who knows what to look for," she said carefully. "Someone who's chosen to do better." His shoulders relaxed slightly. "That's what I want. No more looking the other way." The sun was setting as Hollis made her final rounds for the day. She paused at each paddock, checking latches and water levels with practiced efficiency. The evening air hummed with cicada song, nature's percussion rising as day faded to dusk. At the last enclosure, she took an extra moment after securing the gate. Her hand rested on the metal latch as she thought about the mother leopard and her cubs, now safely relocated to a specialized big cat sanctuary. She remembered those golden eyes meeting hers that final time, not in fear or anger, but with a quiet understanding between two beings who'd chosen to trust each other when it mattered most. No grand speeches marked this moment, no ceremonies or celebrations. Just the peaceful sound of cicadas, the cooling evening air, and the knowledge that she'd done what needed doing. When that injured mother had appeared on her porch that stormy night, Hollis hadn't hesitated. She'd answered the call for help, followed it through to the end, and in doing so had changed not just her own path, but the lives of countless animals to come. The sanctuary was quiet now, but it was a good quiet, the kind that came with purpose fulfilled and new beginnings taking root. Hollis gave the gate one final pat and turned toward home, her steps sure and steady on the familiar path. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new animals in need of help, but she was ready. She'd always be ready to answer that call. If this story warmed you tonight, subscribe and leave a single line that stayed with you. Your words shape tomorrow's story.